Hello, everyone. Today we're delving into the realm of applied behavior analysis to explore a crucial concept: negative punishment. Negative punishment is a fundamental principle within ABA that involves the removal of a stimulus or a decrease in the intensity of the stimulus, resulting in a decrease in the frequency of a behavior. Negative punishment interventions primarily include timeout and response costs. Timeout is a desirable alternative for reducing behavior because of its ease of application, acceptability, rapid suppression of behavior effects, and ability to be combined with other approaches. Response cost is the responsa contingent loss of a specific number of positive reinforcers that has the effect of decreasing the future occurrence of similar responses. Let's take a closer look at each of these interventions and how they're utilized effectively. Timeout is a widely recognized negative punishment intervention. Implicit in the definition of timeout are three essential factors: discriminative environments, immediate loss of reinforcement, access, and a resultant decrease in the behavior that led to timeout. Timeout can be implemented in various forms, including non-exclusion and exclusion timeout. Non-exclusion timeout involves changing elements of the environment without physically removing the individual. Let's talk about each element with easy example. The opportunity to earn reinforcers is removed. This means that the individual is no longer able to access or obtain any rewards or positive consequences for their behavior during the timeout period. For example, if a child is placed in timeout in a classroom setting, they may be isolated from activities where they could earn rewards like stickers or praise. A specific reinforcer is terminated. In this case, a particular reward or positive consequence that was previously available to the individual is stopped or taken away during the timeout period. For instance, if a child is placed in timeout at home, their access to a preferred activity like playing with toys may be temporarily terminated. Repositioning occurs so that observations of ongoing activity continue. But without reinforcement, this involves changing the individual's physical position or surroundings so that they can still observe what is happening around them, but without receiving any reinforcement or positive feedback for their behavior. For example, a child in timeout may be seated in a designated area where they can observe their classmates playing, but cannot actively participate or receive any rewards. The individual is removed to a different space within the timing setting. This means that the individual remains in the same general environment or setting where the undesirable behavior occurred, but is physically relocated to a different area within that setting. This relocation serves to separate them from the ongoing activity or interaction, signaling that their behavior was not acceptable. For instance, a child in a classroom may be moved to a designated timeout corner or chair within the same classroom space. On the other hand, exclusion timeout entails the physical separation of the individual from the environment. This can involve immediate removal from the environment or removal of the environment from the individual. Planned ignoring involves withholding attention or social interaction from the individual, engaging in the problem behavior. Let me give you an example. In a classroom setting, if a student is repeatedly calling out without raising their hand, the teacher may choose to ignore the student's behavior by not responding or acknowledging them until they raise their hand appropriately. Terminate specific reinforcer contact. This tactic involves immediately stopping or removing access to a specific positive reinforcer or rewarding stimulus contingent upon the occurrence of the problem behavior. Let me give you an example. If a child is throwing a tantrum to get candy from the grocery store, the parent may decide to terminate specific reinforcer contact by refusing to buy the candy, thereby removing the opportunity for the child to obtain the desired that is. Contingent observation allows the individual to remain within the same environment or setting where the problem behavior occurred, but restricts their ability to actively participate or receive reinforcement. Let me give you an example. In a classroom, if a student is disruptive during group activities, the teacher may implement contingent observation by allowing the student to remain seated at their desk, but removing their ability to join in the group activity until they demonstrate appropriate behavior. Partition select space timeout. This tactic involves physically relocating the individual to a specific area within the same environment, where they can observe ongoing activities, but are separated from the main interaction or reinforcement opportunities. Let's see example if a child is being disruptive during playtime at a daycare center. The staff may use partition select space timeout by moving the child to a designated timeout corner within the play area, where they can still see other children playing, but are not able to join in until they calm down. Do you understand better each of tactics? Timeout exclusion timeout is the physical separation of the participant from the timing environment. When timeout goes into effect, there are two basic tactics for implementing exclusion timeout contingent on the occurrence of the target behavior. The participant is removed immediately from timing environment, or B, the timing environment is removed immediately from the participant. Let's deep dive with each examples. Removing the participant from the timing environment in a classroom setting. If a student is repeatedly disruptive by talking out of turn, the teacher might ask the student to leave the classroom and wait outside for a few minutes before returning. This physical separation from the classroom environment serves as a consequence for the disruptive behavior, giving the student time to calm down and reflect on their actions. Removing the timing environment from the participant. Imagine a child who throws a tantrum in a supermarket when they're denied a candy bar. In this case, the parent might immediately leave the store with the child and return home without making any purchases. By removing the stimulating environment of the store, the parent removes the opportunity for the child to continue the disruptive behavior and also reinforces the consequences of the tantrum. How we use timeout procedure effectively. 1. Enrich the timing environment. Ensure that the regular environment, where the individual spends most of their time, is stimulating, engaging, and supportive. This can include providing access to preferred activities, positive social interactions, and opportunities for learning and growth. 2. Define the behavior that will lead to timeout. Clearly identify the specific behaviors that will result in a timeout. This helps set clear expectations for the individual and ensures consistency in applying the timeout procedure. 3. Define the exit criteria for timeout. Establish clear criteria for when the timeout will end and the individual can return to the timing setting. This includes determining the duration of each timeout session, the behavioral criteria that must be met for leaving timeout, and the overall length of the timeout program. 4. Follow ethical and legal guidelines. Adhere to appropriate ethical and legal standards when implementing timeout procedures. This includes ensuring that timeouts are used as a last resort and are implemented in a humane and respectful manner. 5. Obtain permission before implementing timeout. Seek permission from relevant stakeholders, such as parents, caregivers, or supervisors, before implementing timeout procedures. This ensures that everyone is aware of and agrees to the use of timeout as a behavior management strategy. 6. Use timeout after positive reductive procedures. Implement timeout only after less intrusive and positive behavior management strategies have been attempted and found to be ineffective. Additionally, ensure that timeout procedures are accompanied by ongoing monitoring, supervision, and evaluation to assess their effectiveness and make any necessary adjustments. By following these steps, timeout procedures can be used effectively as a behavior management strategy, while minimizing potential negative consequences and ensuring the well-being of the individual. Response cost is the response contingent loss of a specific number of positive reinforcers. That has the effect of decreasing the future occurrence of similar responses. It constitutes a fine for misbehavior, and it involves the loss of one or more generalized conditioned reinforcers, tangibles, or minutes of already earned time with a preferred activity. The individual reinforcement preferences of the participant. Let's break down the concept with an easy-to-understand explanation. Response cost is when someone loses something valuable or desirable as a consequence of their behavior. This loss serves as a deterrent to prevent the behavior from happening again in the future. Let's say you have a token system in your classroom, where students earn tokens for good behavior and can redeem them for rewards like extra recess or stickers. However, if a student misbehaves, they might lose some of their tokens as a consequence. This loss of tokens is the response cost. For instance, if a student talks out of turn during class, the teacher might take away one of their tokens. This loss of a token acts as a fine for the misbehavior, discouraging the student from talking out of turn again in the future. Here is some example each for response costs. Negative punishment involves the removal of a pleasant stimulus, or the imposition of a negative consequence in response to an undesired behavior. Let's dive into some examples to understand this concept better. Losing a privilege. Imagine a scenario where a boy hits his sibling. In response to this behavior, a parent decides to take away the boy's iPad as a consequence. By removing the privilege of using the iPad, the parent is employing negative punishment to discourage the aggressive behavior towards the sibling. Fine or monetary penalty. Another example of negative punishment is when a driver violates traffic regulations and is issued a fine or penalty. The imposition of a monetary consequence serves as a deterrent to prevent the driver from repeating the traffic violation in the future. Timeout. In a classroom setting, a teacher may implement a timeout procedure as a form of negative punishment for disruptive behavior exhibited by a student. By temporarily removing the student from the classroom environment and isolating them from social interactions and activities, the teacher aims to discourage the disruptive behavior. Loss of points or rewards. In systems where students earn points or tokens for good behavior, negative punishment can be applied by deducting points or tokens for undesirable behavior. For example, in a token system, if a student engages in disruptive behavior, points or tokens may be deducted as a consequence, reducing the likelihood of similar behavior in the future. These examples illustrate how negative punishment techniques are applied in various contexts to modify behavior. By removing or reducing pleasant stimuli or imposing negative consequences, negative punishment aims to decrease the frequency of undesired behaviors. It's important to note that the effectiveness of negative punishment depends on various factors, including the consistency of its application and the individual's response to the consequence. Response cost is a behavioral intervention designed to decrease the occurrence of a specific behavior by imposing a certain cost or consequence. In simpler terms, it's like a fine or penalty levied upon engaging in undesired behaviors. Just as breaking a rule might incur a financial penalty, response cost applies a similar principle to modify behavior. Bonus response cost involves practitioners making extra reinforcers available to participants non-contingently, meaning they are provided without any conditions attached. However, these additional reinforcers are specifically earmarked for removal when a target behavior occurs, thereby serving as a consequence for undesirable actions. To illustrate this, let's consider a classroom scenario where a teacher implements a token economy system to reinforce positive behaviors. In this system, students earn tokens for completing assignments on time, participating actively in class discussions, and demonstrating respectful behavior. These tokens can be exchanged for rewards such as extra recess time or small treats. Now, suppose a student engages in disruptive behavior during a group activity, despite being aware of the classroom rules. In response to this behavior, the teacher may decide to implement bonus response cost by temporarily removing a previously earned token from the student's token bank. The removal of the token acts as a consequence for the disruptive behavior, signaling to the student that their actions have consequences, and encouraging them to reconsider their behavior in the future. This approach not only reinforces the importance of adhering to classroom rules, but also provides an opportunity for the student to learn from their mistakes and make better choices. Similarly, in a workplace setting, bonus response cost could involve deducting bonus points or privileges from an employee who fails to meet certain performance standards or violates company policies. By offering additional reinforcers that are subject to removal, bonus response cost provides a powerful incentive for individuals to adhere to desired behaviors, while simultaneously discouraging unwanted actions. It's a nuanced approach that allows practitioners to tailor interventions to the specific needs of participants, promoting positive behavioral change in various contexts. Bonus response cost offers a creative and effective strategy for shaping behavior by providing additional reinforcers that can be removed in response to target behaviors. Through thoughtful implementation and consistent application, practitioners can harness the potential of this approach to foster meaningful behavioral outcomes. Let's break down the key points for using response cost effectively in a simple manner. Deliver fines immediately when implementing response costs. It's crucial to apply the consequences promptly after the undesired behavior occurs. This immediate response helps the individual connect their actions with the consequences, reinforcing the cause and effect relationship. Decide whether bonus response cost is a preferred option before employing bonus response cost. Consider whether it's the most suitable approach for addressing the behavior in question. Evaluate the individual's responsiveness to different types of consequences, and choose the one that is most likely to produce the desired behavioral change. Ensure reinforcer reserve. Maintain a reserve of reinforcers that can be used as rewards for desired behaviors. This ensures that there are sufficient incentives available to reinforce positive action and motivate individuals to engage in them. Recognize the potential for unplanned or unexpected outcomes. Be aware that unexpected situations or unintended consequences may arise when using response costs. Stay flexible and prepared to address any unforeseen challenges that may arise during implementation. Avoid overusing response cost. While response cost can be an effective tool for behavior management, it's essential to use it judiciously and avoid relying on it excessively. Overuse of response cost may lead to desensitization or resentment, diminishing its effectiveness over time. Keep records on its effects. Maintain thorough records of the implementation of response cost and its effects on behavior. This includes documenting the frequency and severity of the undesired behaviors, as well as any changes observed in response to the consequences applied. Analyzing these records helps to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention and make informed adjustments as needed. Let's practice some mock exam. 1. Whenever Damien engages in screaming, his mother removes his iPad for 5 minutes. This resulted in a decrease in screaming. What is contingency for Damien's behavior? The contingency for Damien's behavior is negative punishment. Negative punishment involves the removal of a desirable stimulus, in this case, Damien's iPad, contingent upon the occurrence of a behavior screaming, resulting in a decrease in the frequency of that behavior screaming. Damien's screaming behavior decreases because the removal of his iPad serves as a consequence for engaging in screaming. Mock exam 2. Which of the following is an example of response costs? 1. A child is spanked for breaking an expensive mom's phone. The child decided not to touch mom's phone. 2. A kid is grounded for coming in an hour late. Kids coming late is decreased in the future. 3. A rat learns to run a maze, always turning to the right to avoid shock. 4. A wife is always going her room when her husband drinks in the kitchen. The answer is 2. A kid is grounded for coming in an hour late. Kids coming late is decreased in the future. In this scenario, the child being grounded, losing the privilege to engage in certain activities outside the home, serves as a response cost. By experiencing this consequence for coming in late, the behavior of arriving late is decreased in the future. 1. Spanking the child for breaking the expensive phone would be considered an example of positive punishment. Positive punishment involves the presentation of a stimulus, in this case, the spanking immediately following a behavior breaking the phone, which decreases the likelihood of that behavior occurring again in the future. In this scenario, the spanking is intended to decrease the child's tendency to touch or mishandle valuable items in the future. 3. A rat learns to run a maze, always turning to the right to avoid shock. This scenario is an example of negative reinforcement. The behavior of turning to the right is strengthened because it leads to the removal or avoidance of a negative stimulus shock. As a result, the behavior of turning to the right is reinforced by the removal of the aversive stimulus shock. 4. A wife is always going to her room when her husband drinks in the kitchen. This scenario is not an example of negative reinforcement. The behavior of going to her room is not strengthened by the removal or avoidance of an aversive stimulus. Instead, it seems like the wife's behavior is a coping mechanism or a way to distance herself from her husband's drinking behavior. Therefore, it doesn't fit the definition of negative reinforcement. Mock exam 3. 3. What is planned ignoring? 1. Withholding attention for a brief period as a timeout procedure. 2. Providing extra attention to reinforce target behavior. 3. Ignoring all behaviors without any consequences. 4. Rewarding the target behavior with social reinforcers. The correct answer is 3. Ignoring all behaviors without any consequences. 1. Withholding attention for a brief period as a timeout procedure. This option describes a specific intervention known as timeout, where attention is temporarily withdrawn or withheld from an individual as a consequence for undesirable behavior. It's different from planned ignoring because it involves removing attention as a consequence, whereas planned ignoring entails ignoring without any consequences. 2. Providing extra attention to reinforce target behavior. This option describes a reinforcement strategy, where extra attention is provided to reinforce desired or target behavior. It's the opposite of planned ignoring, as it involves actively reinforcing behavior rather than ignoring it. 4. Rewarding the target behavior with social reinforcers. This option involves providing rewards or positive consequences. such as social reinforcement, to strengthen or increase the occurrence of a target behavior. It's a form of reinforcement rather than plan ignoring, which involves no consequences or rewards for the behavior. Mock exam 4. How does terminate-specific reinforcer contact work? 1. The target behavior is ignored completely. 2. The individual is moved to a different environment. 3. A specific activity or reinforcer is immediately stopped. 4. The person is provided with additional reinforcers. The correct answer is 3. A specific activity or reinforcer is immediately stopped. 1. The target behavior is ignored completely. This option describes a technique known as planned ignoring, where no attention or reinforcement is provided in response to a particular behavior. It's different from terminating specific reinforcer contact because it involves ignoring the behavior rather than stopping a specific activity or reinforcer. 2. The individual is moved to a different environment. This option refers to a method of implementing exclusion timeout, where the individual is physically separated from the current environment as a consequence for their behavior. It's not the same as terminating specific reinforcer contact, which involves stopping a particular activity or access to a reinforcer. 4. The person is provided with additional reinforcers. This option describes a scenario where additional reinforcers are given to the individual, possibly as a form of positive reinforcement for desired behavior. It's not related to terminating specific reinforcer contact, which involves removing or stopping access to a reinforcer as a consequence for behavior. Mock exam 5. What is contingent observation? 1. Restricting access to reinforcement completely. 2. Completely isolating the individual from ongoing activities. 3. Allowing the person to observe ongoing activities, but not participate. 4. Providing reinforcement only when the target behavior occurs. The correct answer is 3. Allowing the person to observe ongoing activities, but not participate. 1. Restricting access to reinforcement completely. This option describes a situation where access to reinforcement is entirely blocked, preventing the individual from obtaining any reinforcement. It's different from contingent observation, which allows observation without participation. 2. Completely isolating the individual from ongoing activities. This option involves isolating the individual from ongoing activities, effectively removing them from the environment where the behavior occurred. Contingent observation, on the other hand, allows the individual to remain in the environment and observe, but not participate. 4. Providing reinforcement only when the target behavior occurs. This option describes a reinforcement schedule where reinforcement is delivered, contingent upon the occurrence of a specific behavior. It's not the same as contingent observation, which involves allowing observation without participation in ongoing activities. Mock exam 6. What is partition timeout? 1. Completely removing the individual from the timing setting. 2. Restricting the view of the timing setting through a panel or cubicle. 3. Providing a separate space for the individual to engage in timeout. 4. Allowing the person to participate in the timing setting without any restrictions. The correct answer is 2. Restricting the view of the timing setting through a panel or cubicle. Partition timeout involves creating a physical barrier or partition that restricts the individual's view of the timing setting without completely removing them from it. This allows the individual to remain in the same general environment, but reduces access to reinforcing stimuli or interactions that may be contributing to the problem behavior. For example, in a classroom setting, if a student is engaging in disruptive behavior but does not need to be fully removed from the classroom, the teacher may place a divider or partition around the student's desk to limit their visual access to peers and classroom activities. This partial isolation helps to minimize distractions and provides the student with an opportunity to calm down and refocus without being completely separated from the learning environment. One, completely removing the individual from the timing setting. This describes complete timeout, where the individual is taken away from the original setting altogether. 3. Providing a separate space for the individual to engage in timeout. This also refers to complete timeout, where the individual is physically removed to a different space. 4. Allowing the person to participate in the timing setting without any restriction. This describes not implementing any form of timeout, where the individual continues to participate in ongoing activities without interruption. Mock Exam 7. Which of the following is true about timeout in ABA therapy? 1. Timeout can be implemented without permission. 2. Timeout should be the first choice for reducing problem behavior. 3. Timeout exit criteria should include behavioral criteria for leaving timeout and returning to the timing setting. 4. Timeout should be implemented without monitoring, supervision, and evaluation. The correct answer is 3. Timeout exit criteria should include behavioral criteria for leaving timeout and returning to the timing setting. In ABA therapy, it's essential to establish clear exit criteria for timeout procedures. These criteria define when the individual should leave the timeout setting and return to the regular environment. By including specific behavioral criteria, such as demonstrating calm behavior or complying with instructions, the individual knows what is expected for them to exit timeout successfully. This approach ensures that timeout is used effectively and ethically as part of a behavior intervention plan. 1. Timeout can be implemented without permission. This statement is false. In most cases, especially when working with children or vulnerable populations, permission from caregivers or authorities is typically required before implementing timeout procedures. 2. Timeout should be the first choice for reducing problem behavior. This statement is false. ABA therapy emphasizes the use of least restrictive and positive behavior interventions whenever possible. Timeout is often considered after less intrusive strategies have been attempted and found ineffective. 4. Timeout should be implemented without monitoring, supervision, and evaluation. This statement is false. Effective implementation of timeout requires ongoing monitoring, supervision, and evaluation to ensure its appropriateness, effectiveness, and ethical application. This includes tracking behavior data, assessing the impact of timeout on the individual, and making adjustments as needed based on outcomes. How's my video today? I hope you understand better for negative punishment. If you like this video, please hit subscribe and like button. See you with other video.